I tell people all the time, I end my leadership every time. I try to end it the same way. And I say, the last thing I talk about is, as a leader, but even as a person, just if you're not a leader, just as a person, you're going to make a difference in somebody's life today. Why not make a conscious decision to make a positive difference in that life? If you could do it for 10, good for you. But at least one person every day try to make a positive difference in their life.
It's okay with you?
Yeah, absolutely. We can go anywhere you want to go with it.
Awesome.
Phenomenal. Well, welcome to the Matt and Monica podcast, where we have Lieutenant Colonel Oak McCulloch. It's an absolute honor to have him here. Just going to read a quick little bio that I found online. Oakland McCulloch is a retired lieutenant colonel in the United States Army. He's been a leader all of his life, both in the military and his various civilian organizations after his military service has ended. McCulloch lives with his wife in Daytona Beach, Florida. And Mr. McCulloch, I would love to hear a little bit more about you. If you want to just let us know real quick before we dive into your story. Just tell us your history.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, Matt and Monica. I appreciate it. So I grew up in Northern Illinois, which is why I live in Daytona Beach, because I'm never living through winters like that ever again. That's not going to. And I grew up in a small little farm town, 1,200 people, where everybody knew everybody. And I mean, everybody knew everybody. I always tell people, like, you get in trouble, you do something, and before you could even walk 3 blocks to get home, your parents already knew what you did.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's how small it was.
Yeah.
So I grew up there. I as a kid, I spent most of my time when I worked on a farm. Worked for a bunch of different farmers, everything from dairy cattle to beef cattle, to pigs, sheep, chickens, name it. I worked at it. And then I played baseball, basketball, football growing up in that small little town. When I graduated from high school, I went off to the United States Military Academy at West Point. Didn't graduate from there, but I went there for almost 2 years, a year and a half, and then played baseball there. Left there, came home, helped my father run his business, and I finished up ROTC at Northern Illinois University, which was about 12 miles from my house, and that's where I met my lovely wife, and we just had our 38th wedding anniversary yesterday. So
38th?
So luckily,
how many years did you say that was?
38.
Wow.
Happy anniversary.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So why she married me, I have no idea. But at this point, she doesn't have time to train anybody else. She's stuck with me.
I can relate.
So I finished up ROTC, got my commission as an infantry officer, did my first 5 years in the infantry. Then I did 18 years as an armored cavalry officer.
Awesome.
My last assignment on active duty, I ran an Army ROTC program at the University of South Alabama in Mobile. My favorite assignment in the Army, besides being a platoon leader. And then when I retired, my wife and I wanted to stay in Mobile, Alabama. We loved it there. And so I took a job as the associate director of a food bank right there in Mobile. And I did that for 2 years. And then they offered me to come here to Daytona Beach, Florida. And it's tough to live here, but somebody has to.
Someone's got to do it.
So I took one for the team. And we've been here for 13 years. I recruited for Army ROTC as a Department of the Army civilian for 13 years. And then wrote my book, published my book in February 2021, and started out on the speaking circuit where I'm talking about leadership and success all across the country, and been to London, England to speak as well. And retired from my day job in October 2023, and now all I do is speak. And I'm working on my second book.
Awesome.
So did you ever think that you were going to be an author or a speaker?
Speaker I could see, because as an Army officer, people want you to speak all the time. So I spoke at Veterans Day, Memorial Day, and then when I ran my Army ROTC program, and then again when I was a recruiter here for Army ROTC as a Department of the Army civilian, I went around and I spoke to a bunch of high schools. Like here in Florida, I spoke to 36 different high schools, so all across the state. So I got used to speaking in front of people, and I liked it, and I still like it. I love it. It's my passion. Author, I always thought I wanted to write a book, but I just never really knew that I would.
Right.
And the way that came out was my wife and I and her mom, who lives here in the area, and two other people who live in the condo that we live in. We went to an event at our Catholic church, and it was a 3-hour event. It was kind of a motivational / how do we revitalize the Catholic Church talk event. And the speaker there was Jonathan Fanning, a great speaker. If you ever get a chance to listen to him speak, absolutely phenomenal. And every time we took a break, because he didn't speak for all 3 hours, he spoke for like 40, 45 minutes and then took a 15, 20-minute break. And every time he took a break, I went up and I picked his brain because he was doing what I wanted to do. He was standing up in front of people talking. And he gave me great insights that I still use today. And so I did that all 3 times. And then at the end, we said our goodbyes and thanked him, and he turned around and started to walk away. And then he turned around and he said, "Oak, have you written a book?" And I said, "No, but I'm thinking about it." He said, "Stop thinking about it and write."
Awesome.
Just do it.
So I went that night. It was the 15th of February, 2020. Went that night, wrote out the table of contents, started writing it the next day, and I published it on the 12th of February, 2021.
Oh,
wow.
Cool.
Was it hard to gather your thoughts and like keep it organized and stuff? Were you just like going at it and it like went awesome, like smooth? And
well, I would say it went smooth, but it was, what I did was I took my keynote talk, my leadership talk that I've been given for 12 years, and I just put that into a book form. And of course, if you're speaking for 1 hour, you can't talk about everything that you would want to.
Yeah.
You got to limit stuff.
Right.
So, but in the book, I could write whatever I wanted, add all the things, tell all of the stories that go along with the principle I was talking about. And so it went pretty smoothly. The one thing because I talked to a lot of people who want to be authors and speakers, contact me on Zoom and ask, want to pick my brain. And I said, one of the things that helped me a lot, because, I'd be laying in bed and I'd think of something and I think, I'll write that tomorrow.
Right.
Yeah. Right. Go out. And no way do you remember that stuff. So what I did was I took on my computer, I put a folder for each of the chapters and I put a blank Word document in there. And so if something came to me at 10 o'clock at night, I could get up, come in here in my office, type a 1 or 2 sentence thing, and then go back to bed. And then the next morning, at least it triggered what I was thinking. Yeah. And then I could expound on it or expand it however I needed to. And that helped out a lot. It really did. And that's the technique that I'm starting now, is I've got all the chapters and all the blank pages, and I've started in chapter 1. So we'll see. Surprisingly enough, chapter 1 was the last chapter I wrote in my last book.
Interesting.
Wrote everything else before that, and then went back to chapter 1.
Oh, that's interesting. That's cool.
Yeah, it's something I've always wanted to do, and I've actually been thinking about it the last 6 months or so. I've been telling her, I'm like, man, we really should try to,
write a book.
We have somebody that's also an author, and they have somebody that could set us up. He said so.
But I definitely can
go through the process.
Yeah, I can relate to the thoughts at night, because I always think about so much stuff at night, and I'm like, all right, you're gonna remember this in the morning, and I never do. Yeah. I don't remember any of it.
You don't.
So I need to start doing what you're doing, or write it down, little notes or something.
Or just keep a notepad. But the problem with the notepad is then you got to turn a light on, and then you wake up.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I just got up and came in here.
Yeah.
On the other side of the condo, and never even knew I was up and out of bed, probably. And then I went right back to bed. But, I'm going to give you the same advice that gentleman gave me. Don't stop thinking about it and write it.
Yeah.
Because I guarantee you, somebody needs your story.
Yeah.
No, I'm sure that
I believe that too.
she definitely needs to. We really want to talk about her story.
I'll have to write a book, and he'll have to write a book.
Yeah, we're just waiting for the right time.
Yeah.
I wanted to touch upon, you mentioned the cavalry aspect of things. What vehicles were primarily being used when you were in your unit?
Yeah. So when I started, I went on active duty in 1986.
Okay.
So right then was about the time that those big five that we fought the Desert Storm with,
113s.
M1, the Bradley Infantry Fighting Vehicle, the Apache helicopter, MLRS, and the HEMTs.
Are you familiar with the 113s?
Yeah, we my unit, I was in the 24th Infantry Division. When I got there, we were transitioning from the M113s to the Bradley Infantry Fighting Vehicles.
We were still using the 113s when I got out in 22. We were training with them in my reserve unit.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time driving and sleeping, and
yeah. Well, I had one because I was a mortar platoon leader as well. I started off as an infantry platoon leader, Bradley Infantry, and then I went to, actually, I'm going to date myself here, ITVs, improved towed vehicles, which they don't even have in the Army anymore. And then haven't had them for many years. And then I went to a mortar platoon, and I had four deuce mortar platoon. So I had 113 series vehicles, but as a platoon leader, I had Bradley. And then when I switched over to armor, I was always on an M1 tank.
Oh, okay, cool.
We'll have to pop up pictures because I don't know what you guys are talking about.
Yeah.
So
I sent her. I remember I sent you a video of that tank that started up.
It's going. Looks like it's going slow.
Sounds like a jet airplane.
Yeah, like a turbine engine.
I remember that. Yeah. Okay. That's cool.
I had one at the wash rack when I was in NTC in Fort Irwin, next to me, and I remember I'll never forget the thing starting up next to me. It was pretty cool.
That is awesome. Yeah.
Just don't stand too close behind it.
Yeah, exactly. Just melt you.
Oh.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, what are your thoughts as to the military when you enlisted all those years ago to when you got out? On just my short experience, I'll just real quick share. In 8 years, I heard how they started renaming things, and they started just making the standards lower as far as physical fitness, and I don't know, that really disappoints me. Just almost like weakening things, and just lowering the standard is shouldn't ever be the answer, I believe. But I just don't understand why.
That's always, I always tell people that's a quick fix. Quick fixes never work.
Yeah.
And here's the problem: is that when you do that, you lower the standards, let people in that you probably wouldn't let in, and we're letting people in that 10 years ago we would never let in the military. It never works out, and eventually you're going to have to get rid of them. And a lot of times they cause a lot of problems in the time that they come into the time you have to get them out of the service. And I think that's all the branches, except maybe the Marines. The Marines will tell you they don't lower their standards.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I buy all that, but but I think that we have certainly seen the lowering of the standards, and whether that's physical or health reasons, we're letting people in that we would never have let in before.
Yeah.
And we're going to pay for it down the road. I think we did some of that in when we first started the volunteer force, and we paid for that, and we did some of it again right before Desert Storm, and we paid for it then. But I think we're rounding the corner, and I think we're seeing what we've done. Mm-hmm. Hopefully, we're going to get on the right track here.
Yeah.
Is that because we need more people to join?
When we were 150,000 soldiers in the Middle East and Afghanistan and Iraq, you had to have soldiers. So we allowed people in that probably shouldn't have been in. And here lately, the last few years, although the Army says they made their recruiting mission last year, but a few years before that, they had made their mission. So every year you got less and less soldiers, but you got to you got to try to fill the ranks the way they did it, instead of doing it with pay, compensation, transportation, education, those kind of things. They did it with lowering the standards.
Right.
I just wanted to ask, one of my thoughts was you're one of the few people, it sounds like, you are a rarity, sounds, with your wife and yourself being able to make it 38 years and, through all of those deployments and, training exercises. If you were to pass along some advice to people, which a lot of it's, we all know the answers, I think, to how to make things work, but sometimes just hearing it, how were you able to manage and make it through all those years and still maintain? And
yeah, so one thing I was lucky. My wife she was an Army nurse for 8 years, so she understood the military system. That that when I was deployed, it wasn't because I wanted to be gone. I didn't have a choice. But I think that a couple things I would say it attributes our good marriage and our long marriage. Number one piece of advice, because working with ROTC, I had a bunch of soon-to-be lieutenants who were all getting married right out of college, and a lot of them would come and ask me what my number one advice to somebody who's getting married, and I say this was always my number one advice: never say anything without thinking about what you're going to say, because once you say it, it can't be unsaid.
Right. Yeah.
So be careful what you say.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I think is that you just have to treat each other with the respect that each other deserve. Everybody does something a little bit different for the family. My wife was lucky enough that she got to stay home with our children. So she was a stay-at-home mom after her 8 years in the Army, minus a few times she went back to work for different things in nursing. And when we were in Australia, she worked at the embassy for a little while.
Okay.
But for the most part, she was a stay-at-home mom. And I respected the things that she did. What she did at home was just as important as what I did at work. And especially with the kids, because I was gone so much, on deployments, on training exercises, gunnery, all those things that take you away from your family, that we had to trust each other, and that, she was doing the right things at home, and, and we divided things up a little bit so that we could use her strengths for certain things, and my strengths for certain things. But I think you just got to treat each other with the respect that both of you are due.
Yeah.
Be patient with each other and communicate. Like, communication is everything.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people need to know that you can put effort into being happy. You can also put effort into loving somebody.
Yeah.
Like it sounds weird saying that, but it really works.
No, that's absolutely true. Yeah.
People
my wife has a thing that I've heard her say plenty of times. You can choose to be happy or you can choose to be sad.
Yeah. So true.
It's your choice what you want to do. And I absolutely agree with you that, you got to make, it's a conscious decision and a continuous effort to have a good, healthy marriage. It doesn't just happen.
Right.
Anybody who tells you that, run away from it. That's not true.
Yeah.
We all know it's not true. It takes effort to do it. That, just a day to day, every day, you wake up and you make that decision that you're going to make things work and you're going to try to make each other happy and all those things that make a marriage good.
Yeah. Right. Got to work together, not against each other.
Yeah.
And that's right. Especially when you get kids.
Yeah.
And you got 5 of them. So, and that's important. It really is to be on the same sheet of music, because I'm a huge believer that, the youth today is our future. And we are going to reap what we sow.
Yep.
So if we don't do a good job of raising them and teaching them good morals, ethics, and values, and teaching them to be good young men and women, then we deserve everything we get.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. And I think that this society
needs to do better.
Society has allowed weak men to create hard times. And I'm hoping that we're in the hard times right now. And what scares me is I don't really know what part of that cycle we're in.
Yeah.
The world's a very unique place right now.
We're moving back up.
Working our way back up.
I hope so. But and then the other part of me thinks the only reason I think we might be in hard times right now is because of what we see and hear on the media. And it is, I said to her, and I try to say to people lately, like, we are at a point as far as technology is concerned, where I'm confident if I have access to AI in these programs where I could recreate video footage that looks pretty real, what does the government have access to? That, like what could do these media companies that are worth, insane amounts of money, like what could they do? And it's scary.
And they are doing.
Oh yeah. And it's just, I'm hoping with the recent changes in the world, and there's so much going on. I know we talked shortly. Actually, we talked for quite a while the other night. Just when we had the phone call.
That was awesome.
I see that there's a lot more faith, a lot more people talking about it. Like, it was such a taboo subject to talk about God, faith, religion, and spirituality.
Like, you couldn't talk about it.
Yeah,
or people would like judge you or whatever, and it's changing.
Yeah,
now.
I think you're right. I think that it. And my wife and I have this conversation quite a bit, that we see a resurgence of people going not just back to church, but back to religion.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, in our Catholic church, we now see young families with young kids back in church.
That's incredible.
Which, 10 years ago, 7 years ago when we started there, you saw almost no
like
kids.
That. Yeah.
Well, I think it goes back to hard times because, unfortunately, and I have to be the first to admit, I haven't been to church since I was a teenager. And then last year, a little over a year ago, hard times brought me to church. And at 36 years old, I started going to church, and we've been going quite consistently. And it's been instrumental. And even if I got a friend of mine I was talking to who's going through hard times, and I told him, I'm like, I'm never one to push religion upon anybody, but there's always a seat available for you, and it may be worthwhile just to see if you could feel the energy, and who knows,
And if you don't, okay, that's you.
Yeah.
But I will tell you, a lot of people do. If once they go back,
they
start seeing the benefit of going back to church. And I think I'm no different than anybody else. I went to church as a kid, first because my parents made me go.
Yep. I think it's like all of us.
Yeah. And then, but when I went to college, I kind of fell out of going to church. And it really wasn't until I married my wife, because I was not a Catholic as a kid, growing up. I converted to Catholicism because my wife is Catholic, and I just felt like we needed one religion in the family. We were married for, I don't know, probably 5-6 years before I converted to Catholicism. But I still went to mass, to church every Sunday with her and the kids. And I just couldn't participate the way I wanted to. And so finally I just made that conversion. But I think I always people come back to church, especially if they're having a hard time.
Yeah.
Because there's people there that want to help. And helping might just be listening.
Right.
Just having an ear that you can talk to, that you can bounce things off of.
Yeah.
Because believe it or not, they've probably gone through a lot of the same things you're going through.
Yes.
We all have.
Yes.
So, that's just another community, another
safe place.
Friends, and people that you can talk to.
Yeah. I wanted to touch upon something that I learned, probably one of the most valuable things. I feel like I say that about everything, but vulnerability, I've noticed over the past couple of years, I've always been a really open book, and I've always had an easy time talking to people. I've always been that awkward friend to most of my tough guy friends that don't ever talk about
normal people don't.
Yeah. And it's always opened doors, I feel like. And I think people, I hope at least, they've respected it. I'm sure there's people that think it's weird, but in the same sense, there has been times where I've been vulnerable going through my own struggles over the past couple of years and talking to people. And when I say open doors, it's changed my life. And we've had some turbulence, and since I say changed my lens, or I changed my perspective, whereas I realized the value of just going through those hard times, and, going to church and seeing other people go through things. And we had somebody that lost, their significant other today, actually. And that's weighed on us, and not in a bad way. I'm not complaining, but we've been praying, and it's pretty cool because even with my kids, hey, let's pray for their family because we know what they're going through, or at least I shouldn't even say that. We have an idea of what they're going through. We truly don't. Just yeah, life is short, and people don't realize that, and like remembering how fragile it is helps you be grateful.
Well, it's just like you don't really know the good without the bad. So if you've had this really easy life for the majority of your life, you don't know. We all take stuff for granted. It's
we
like,
do.
yeah, and I know that, and I know I definitely take stuff for granted, but every day I try to do better to notice things and soak things in and be aware that like I'm blessed for that, and thankful for this and that, and my family and my home. And it is hard. Like you're saying how you're in your 30s and it's taken you such a long time to realize things, and a lot of times it does take until you're in your 30s maybe to realize things because it's experience in life.
I agree. And one of the things that my wife's taught me, one of the many things that my wife has taught me, is way smarter than I am. And again, she was in the Army. I was in the Army for given 40 years of my life to the Army in one way or another.
Yep.
And so we are never late for anything. In fact, we're that couple that always shows up 15 minutes early.
Yeah.
Because of me, mainly. We've actually been going somewhere, and she said, we can't show up yet. And we've pulled into the parking lot.
Wait in the car. Yeah.
But one of the things she has taught me that absolutely we use and it has made a difference is one day we were ready to go somewhere. I don't remember where it was. And I know how long it takes to get there. And we're leaving like 5 minutes earlier than we normally do. And I said, so why are we leaving so early? And she said, because we might just run into somebody in the elevator or in the lobby or in the garage that just needs us to listen to them today. They just need to, and we need to be able to dedicate a couple minutes and give them a couple minutes just to talk about what it is they need to talk about. And you're right.
If people thought like that,
it's actually happened to us where we've gone down to the garage and run into somebody, and you could just tell that person needed to talk. And so we just sat there and listened to them for a couple of minutes until they got it off their chests or whatever.
Should have brought your wife on.
I know. Yeah. But sometimes it's all people need. Maybe they don't need the advice or you to tell them what they need to do. They just need that ear, right? They just need to like get it out.
Yeah. I think so. I think so. Now, there are times when people need advice but I always tell people, never avoid that conversation when somebody, you can tell when somebody just needs to talk.
Yeah.
And you just need to be there because you never know. You might be the person who just saved that person's life.
Exactly.
Because that may have been a point where they were deciding whether or not to live or do something that they shouldn't do. And you might be the difference in that person.
Yeah, we talk a lot about that. And as you know, we try to advocate as much as we can for mental health. And, it's different when you're on the other side of it and you're needing the help. It's not easy to ask for help by any means. I think if it's more of a stigma where more people do though, and more people show the strength and find that courage to be able to do that, you're also in a weird way helping other individuals. I believe, especially when you're open about asking for help.
Right.
And I think I told you how I met that VA police officer that he was just there to listen for me. And, that really changed me. I think every single little occurrence when you have somebody that really opens up to you or that you go out of your way to listen to people, I think it makes you more, I guess, what am I trying to say? More
tuned and aware of.
I think it slowly will make you better at just being able to talk to people, and it makes it easier to be authentic and just real with individuals. And like that changes everything.
I think people need to be okay with asking for help for sure. But I think people need to be more okay with, even if they aren't, offering help, but don't be like, oh, I don't know anything that the person's going through. I don't want them to come talk to me. Just be okay with yourself. If they come to you, let them come to you. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
like get that wall down from your own wall.
Well,
And
to me, life is about leadership, especially, and I about it in my book and in my talks. But leadership and life is about people and trust.
Yeah.
End of story. Period. You can throw other things in there if you want to make it a little bit nicer, a little more flowery or whatever. But in the end, it's all about people and trust. And people, the way people end up trusting you is through getting to know you and you getting to know them. And that allowing a conversation like that to take place grows that trust quite a bit, because even if they just met you, they now know that they can talk to you, and that trust grew just a little bit. And the next time it'll grow a little bit more.
Yep.
And that's, we got to get more of that in this country. I tell people all the time, I end my leadership every time. I try to end it the same way. And I say, the last thing I talk about is, as a leader, but even as a person, just if you're not a leader, just as a person, you're going to make a difference in somebody's life today. Why not make a conscious decision to make a positive difference in that life? If you could do it for 10, good for you. But at least one person every day try to make a positive difference in their life. Imagine how much better our families, our neighborhood, communities, cities, state, country, world would be if everybody made one positive difference every day in somebody's life.
And that's
the ripple of that would be huge.
You'll appreciate this very much because of our last conversation and you mentioning that. I actually put a note on my mirror in our bathroom that all kids have to use. And I said something along the lines of, make one person feel good today. So imagine if everybody went around and putting that on their mirrors or putting notes like that. Like that little tiny thing could change the entire world, at least a little bit. We
got to start with the adults. The parents have to, get that in place kind of for the kids. The kids are going to shadow their parents and want to be like their parents and be a positive influence.
And like that ripple effect that you caused is all you do, just having a conversation with us last week, just, and me doing that for my kids. And who knows, maybe my kids will take that with them and they will push that upon their friends, or when they grow up, they influence their kids to make that positive change. Is all it took was a couple seconds of you, expressing that to me. And now, I'm hoping it creates a bigger ripple effect. Hopefully somebody sees this and they try that. And I just think there's so much abundance of positivity that can come out of just having conversations, just being authentic and being a decent freaking human being. That's so easy. It takes a lot less energy. And I'm a firm believer that there's so many good people out there, and
way more good people than bad people.
Everybody I think wants to be happy. They're just
well, it's funny because I have this conversation quite a bit, and I always tell people that the majority of Americans, and I think probably the world, but certainly Americans, are center left, center right.
Yes, I agree.
They might be a little bit left, might be a little bit right. Who cares? We all have a whole lot in common. Education, healthcare, our job, whatever it is, we all have a bunch in common. But we tend to emphasize what we have different. And if you start there, you're never going to get to what you have in common. But if you start with what you have in common and work your way out, you'll get to those things that you have difference. And you're never going to convince, nobody's not, we're not ever going to have everybody on the same sheet of music believe in the exact same things. I got it. But maybe you can get a little bit closer and you can figure out why they believe what they believe, and they can figure out why you believe what you believe, and you can come to a compromise that helps everybody involved.
I think that word compromise is pretty major, because I think as kids grow up, it's always one side or the other. I want this or I want that, instead of teaching them to compromise. And let's try to make the majority of the people happy instead of just one person or each individual person happy. Let's try to pick out the good qualities and the good stuff in situations rather than dwelling on the bad stuff or the negative stuff.
I think it's I'm all for compromising. The one thing I always tell people is you just can't compromise your principles, your values,
Right.
Yes.
you get like who's looking back in the mirror at you.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you can't compromise those things
Right.
as long as they're not what's required to compromise isn't that. We got plenty of room to compromise with people.
Yep.
I was kind of thinking when you mentioned leadership. It's something that I never would have thought that could be so valuable as like leadership training. Because I'm not a leader. I work a position underneath somebody else at my job. But I think anybody and everybody should strive to be a leader. They should strive to be that person that can initiate that ripple or impact on other people. And if you are a good leader, you're going to have the ability to be able to have just so much positive change in the world. But something else I really wanted to ask you and touch upon is imposter syndrome. I have suffered imposter syndrome horribly, and I think everybody does to a certain extent, but
Yeah.
I have been, it's something I've battled with. Even now with this podcast, for example, I worry about judgment all the time. I worry, and I'm a lot better now than I have
You're a lot
been.
better.
I'm significantly better. I think it's like every single time we do or we make some sort of progress or some accomplishment or acknowledgement
Or good feedback, right? Like good feedback.
Yeah. But have you dealt with imposter syndrome, or have you always been pretty darn comfortable doing everything you're doing?
So I think I've been pretty comfortable. I grew up in a very small town, so I was captain of my baseball, basketball, football teams.
Okay.
But having said that, I think everybody has that doubt in their minds. Am I good enough?
Did you get that from your parents? Maybe did your parents just do a really good job raising you to the point you were confident? Do you think?
Yeah, my father. He had a rule in our house. It's called the 75% rule, and he told me, son, if you can't do something better than 75% of the people doing it, then you need to do one of two things. You either need to figure out how to get better at it, or you need to go do something else because obviously it doesn't matter to you.
I love that.
Yeah.
And I took that to heart.
Mm-hmm.
The secret is you got to be honest with yourself.
Yeah.
Because if you're not honest with yourself, then you'll say, well, I'm better than 75%. And you may not be. So you got to be honest with yourself doing that reflection piece. And we can talk about reflection later because I think reflection is huge.
Yes.
But he instilled that in me, and he instilled a winning attitude in me. His philosophy was every time you do something, you ought to want to win. Now, you're not going to win every time, and you got to learn how to lose. But you want to win, that desire to win.
Yeah.
Look, I don't care if I'm playing old maid with an 11-year-old. I want to win. That's just the way it is.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so for me, that's always driven me to get as good as I could be. And that's a never ending thing. You can always get a little bit better.
Yeah.
And so, but you're absolutely right. We all have doubts at times. I don't care who you are, I don't care how good you are, what you do. You have some doubts sometimes. And the key is to not let that doubt keep you from doing something new. I read somewhere a quote that said, don't be afraid to fail, because failure is the step to the next, whatever it is you're going to do next.
Yeah.
Okay. And the one that drove that home to me, I was lucky. I was a senior captain, and I got to listen to General Hal Moore talk, probably one of the greatest combat generals that this country's ever produced. And one of the points of his talk was, life is not like baseball. It isn't 3 strikes and you're out. If you try something and it doesn't work, try something else. If that doesn't work, try something else. And if that doesn't work, you try something else.
Yeah.
And you keep trying until you figure it out and figure out something that works for you.
I love that.
I really like that.
I also feel like with the imposter syndrome that it's not just I'm not good enough. It's like if you're up here, you don't want to be a failure. You don't want to let people down.
Not even a failure, just not do as well as you could have done.
Right.
Yeah.
I was just thinking it's not like, oh, I'm not good enough, I can't do this or do that. But if you are captain of a team, it's maybe not imposter syndrome. It's like you can't let your team down. You can't let your coach down or your family down.
Yeah.
So it's like a different way that I was thinking of it. I don't
Yeah,
know.
well, it's all mindset. I
Yeah.
believe, and I use this a lot. In fact, I used it with my 10-year-old granddaughter while she was here over Christmas. I said, because she was talking about, she wasn't sure she could do something, and I said, Henry Ford quote. I said, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right.
100%.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
If you
all in
think you
here.
can, you got a chance. If you think you can't, you've got no chance.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I like the quote. I believe is by Bonnie Ware. She wrote the book Five Regrets of the Dying. And one of my favorite quotes I ever heard is live a life true to yourself. One of the world's greatest accomplishments is living a life true to yourself in a world that's trying to make you something that you're not. And there's so many people that are afraid to try something new or afraid to try one of their dreams because of being worried about judgment, kind of going back to that imposter syndrome. But
Yeah.
it just,
Judgment and failure.
yeah, I just think when you are close to death a lot, and I listened to somebody else talk about this as well, is like a lot of people that experience a lot of loss, they're very scared of death, or they have obvious fears that most of us all share. But there's a lot of value in about thinking about death often and thinking about those negative things that shouldn't really be negative. Because I think if you put a lot of thought and emphasis on realizing how temporary everything is, it helps you be grateful. Just knowing, especially every morning now, after me experiencing what I've experienced in the last couple of years, it's like I just realize how quickly life can just pull the carpet out from underneath you.
Yeah.
And those reminders, I think, are really important, but it's also so important to pay attention to those reminders, because I wish it that I had the same reactions that I've had now when I was younger, and like losing other people, aunts and uncles, or grandparents that I've lost. I wish I'd learned that valuable life lesson then. I don't know why it took so long,
but it's also very different when things happen to other people and not to you. So like from a distance, you can feel sad for people and heartbreak for them too, but it's not the same until it actually happens to you.
Yeah.
But I think one of the keys is that you have to confront those fears.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's how, and then, go back to reflection, because
Yep.
I'm a huge believer in reflection.
Mhm.
I had somebody told me one time, I learned a lot from that experience. And I said, you didn't learn anything from that experience. Experience is full of emotion, and you don't learn emotion. You learn from reflecting on that experience.
Yeah.
And Matt, in the Army, you got the after action review, which is nothing else but reflection.
Yeah.
What was I supposed to do? What did I do? How can I get better at it?
Yeah.
And so I kind of incorporated that. I incorporated that in at the food bank. I incorporated it in my Department of the Army civilian job. And I now have incorporated it in my life, because I think if you can, I'm here to tell you, if you incorporate daily reflection into your life, you will change your life.
Yes.
Because you will get better, because you're making a conscious decision to say, okay, this is what I was supposed to do. This is what I did. How can I get better at it? Even if you were successful, that doesn't mean you can't get better at it.
Right. Yeah.
And so I start my day and end my day, because I go figure 40 years Army experience. I'm a routine guy. I start and end my day the exact same way every single day. I start my day, I listen to the daily mass, I say my prayers, I read a couple of chapters in the Bible. What happens after that, I got little control over.
Yeah.
But at least I started on the right foot. And then I end my day every single day the same way, no matter where I am in the world. I try to read something that before I go to bed. It might be an article, blog, or a couple pages in the book I'm reading. Whatever it is, I try to read something. I write in my journal, because I keep a daily journal. I've kept it for 52 years.
That's amazing.
And my wife's going through that now. So
Cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Wish I
And
did
then
that.
the last thing I do is I reflect on what I was supposed to do that day. What was I supposed to do? How did I do it? How can I get better tomorrow?
That's awesome.
And if you do that and you're honest with yourself,
Mm-hmm.
you will make a huge difference.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Throughout your career, throughout your life, what were the your biggest life defining moments? I mean, good, bad, whatever you want to talk about. But if you were to reflect back, what are those moments that were just like the pinnacles that
Really
just taught you the
shifted.
most?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think I've ever been asked that question. And I think there's several.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think as a kid growing up, again, my father, to drive that winning attitude and be the best you can be. You know, I played baseball since Little League, little tiny kid. Even before Little League, I played out in the backyard, whatever. And I played all the way through college. And it always used, initially it bothered me that when we get done with a Little League game and I hear parents telling their kid, "Oh, you played a great game." And I know they didn't. And I played in the same game and they were horrible.
Uh,
But their parents told them to play a great game. My father told me I played a great game one time. And he didn't even say great. He said good game one time in all my life.
I love that. I do.
Every other time he said, you did okay, but here's something you can work on.
mhm.
And
Yep.
if it was ground, I played shortstop. So if it was filling a ball going to my right, he'd hit me or throw me 100 balls going to my right. If it was to my left, he'd throw it to my left. Whatever it was, he would emphasize that not only you have to admit that you didn't do that as well as you could, but then you have to commit to actually doing something to change that.
Mhm.
Because just admitting that you're not very good at something doesn't help anything unless you make the commitment to get better at whatever it is that you want to do. And again, that goes back to his 75% rule. If you're not willing to make that commitment, then go do something else,
Yes.
at least.
I love it.
That's awesome.
Just trying to be the best that you can be. Like,
Yeah.
why wouldn't
Well,
people want to be the
he told
best
me
that they could be?
he told me one time, he said, "Son, I don't care if you're sweeping floors. Be the best floor sweeper there is."
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know? So I think that was
Yep.
one of the defining moments in my life. And I can't tell you exactly when it hit me, but I was a kid. And then getting married and having children
Yes.
Mhm.
certainly changed my outlook on life
Yeah.
for the better.
Mm-hmm.
And because then at that point I realized, when I got married, I realized it wasn't just about me, but when we had kids, it really hit you that it's not
Yep.
about you.
Yeah.
And I think I knew that. Obviously, I knew that because I believe in servant leadership, and I had some great role models who were servant leaders. But when it's your children, you really take that to heart that it's
Mhm.
not about you anymore. It's
Right.
about them, and trying to make them pass on those lessons that you learned to make them even better than you are at
Right.
whatever it is they want to do. And I never, ever tried to encourage my kids to go in whatever profession. I said, it's your choice. You can do
Mhm.
whatever you want. Just be the best at whatever it is you decide to do. And then I think the last defining moment that I would say is when I realized I was going to retire a lieutenant colonel.
Mm-hmm.
I had to, again, step back and reflect on that. And, and I could look back and I could see things that caused me not to get promoted to colonel without a doubt. And I write about it in my book. But I reflected back on it and I said, would I change anything? No, I wouldn't.
Good.
Mhm.
And would I have reacted the same way that my boss reacted in that situation? Maybe. And so, I just came to terms with it that I did the best I could do. And I tried to get better every day. And just the way it ended, and move on and figure out the next chapter of my life.
It's awesome that you're still serving other people, though,
Yeah.
which is incredible. It's
Yeah, well, thank you. It
Yeah.
really is my passion at this
Mhm.
point. It really is. I just turned 62 a couple of weeks ago, And a buddy of mine here in Daytona, because I live right near the Intercoastal, I love to fish.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I feel horrible for you.
Yeah. And he says to me, he says, "Oh, what are you doing?" He said, "Why are you flying all over the country, all over the world talking?" He said, "Why don't you just go out and fish every day?" And I said, "I can't." I look at it as our responsibility to pass on these lessons. Because if we don't do it, who's going to do it?
Yeah.
And again, we're going to reap what we sow. If we don't help people be better leaders, whether they're or better people, because I think that's part of a leader's job as well, not just make them better at work, but help try to make them better people, then what are we doing on this earth? That's not what we're here for.
Yeah, and it gives you purpose, I'm sure you could find a little purpose going out fishing every day, but I mean, there's nothing better than helping other people. And I can't even begin to imagine the amount of impact that you've had on other people throughout your life.
I was just going to say, just being like an influence is just like parents, you can't just be like, you need to eat healthier, you need to work out. But then that parent like sits on the couch 24/7 and eats chips all day long. So you going out there helping other people, you are influencing so many people to want to do that too. And they see the outcome, and it's.
Well, I was lucky in the last 16 years of my association with the Army. I worked with young men and women in ROTC programs, trying to get them commissioned to be leaders for the Army and for the country. And I've had my hand in commissioning one way or another over 600 lieutenants in the Army, and a lot of them stay in contact with me. Not all of them, not even the majority of them, but a lot of them do.
Yep.
And it's always nice when they'll call you up, because sometimes they'll call just for some advice or to let me know their next duty assignment. And that's always nice. I like that. But I don't know, about 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago, I was going up to Savannah for a conference, for a recruiting conference for my job. And a young lady, I'll call her young lady because she was when I had her in my program, who was in my program at the University of South Alabama. She was stationed at Fort Stewart. And so we said, well, we got to get together and have lunch together. And she was one of those who had kept in touch with me over the years. And so we met and we're eating lunch. And she said, "Oh, by the way, I just came out on the Lieutenant Colonel's list. You think that didn't make me feel old?" And I said, "Congratulations." I said, "So what do you want to do next?" And she said, "I only have one thing left that I want to do in the Army." And I said, "So what's that?" She said, "I want to go back to the University of South Alabama and be the professor of military science and run that program like you did."
Oh,
really?
That's the impact you can have.
Wow.
If you want to have that kind of impact.
Yeah.
You can just coast through if you want.
Yeah.
And that's the impact you'll have. But if you really care about people, then you can have a huge impact in people's lives.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
I was just going to say the impact that she has on kids' lives, working first through fourth grade.
Absolutely.
It's just funny because everywhere we go, people, these kids will see her and
they're so like, lovey. They want to hug. Like all day long.
They love her because she loves them, and these kids just crave that just real authentic love.
They can tell it.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's not something you can fake.
Yep.
Yeah. Right. They don't run away from me, so it makes me feel good.
You might fake it for a few minutes.
Right.
But if you spend any amount of time with somebody, they can tell that you fake it. You're faking it.
Yeah.
And
not authentic. Going back to your point, Matt.
Yeah.
But authenticity.
Yes.
Yeah. There's a pre-care that I just adore, and he always just does this cute little smile when he's on the bus. We started doing this. So I'll just be outside and I'll just look around and there's a window. There he is. And he's going like this. I just love you. And it's just so much joy. And I just hope the impact on him and everyone, all the other little kids, that it's just, I want them to always hold that with them forever, and I know they're going to grow up and probably when they're seniors in high school, forget that I was even there. I don't know, but hopefully just a little bit of something. Just a little bit still in there.
If you do it right, and it sounds like you are, if you do it right, I promise you they'll remember you the rest of their life.
I'll be like that.
I remember all my teachers all through.
Yeah.
Some better than others. Some
Yep.
better than others. And I'm sure that some of them remember me as well.
Yeah.
But the two that I stayed in contact my entire adult life, my whole time to the Army, my high school history teacher, who just died about 18 months ago, but I stayed in contact with him the entire time. And my high school basketball coach. So Mr. Schindler, who was my history teacher, who is why I majored in history in college. There's no doubt about it. And I give him credit for that. And then my high school basketball coach, Coach Terry Nitzwicki, who both were servant leaders, they were people that you knew if you had a problem, even if it wasn't about history, if it wasn't about basketball, didn't matter. You could go talk to them and they would give you some advice, or they just listen to you, or whatever it is you needed, they would do it for you. Because both of them realized that their job wasn't just to teach history or to together a basketball team. It was to help create good young men and women who are going to grow up to be good fathers, good husbands, good wives, good mothers, good productive members of society. And I got that. And that was really my first introduction to servant leadership. And it just me. And then I was lucky, had a couple other really good servant leaders throughout my career in the Army. I've had the other end as well.
Yeah.
But you can have that but you got to care, and they got to know you care. And if they won't say know you care, they will never forget you. I promise.
Yeah, that makes my heart happy.
I think when it comes to society right now, and this is my opinion, I think one of the biggest problems that we face as a nation, or maybe in the entire world, is there's a lot of people right now that are suffering that they don't have hope in, or they don't have faith. What would your message be to those people that are right now out there that are they feel like life has just let them down, or they feel like they have that, I hate to say it, but that victim mentality where they just, poor me, and there's a lot of people that are in those situations that, you have been through a lot, and it's very unfortunate. But I'll let you take the floor on that.
Yeah, I think you're right. There are a lot of people like that in the world today. And well, I guess a couple pieces of advice that I would give them is, number one, keep a positive attitude that you can make some changes if you want. It's not going to be easy, probably, but if you really want to change, then you can start down that road of change. It may take a while, but you can at least start down that road. If you don't start down that road, then things aren't going to change.
Jordan Peterson says, start with your bed. Start making your bed in the morning.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Little things. And that somebody asked me one time, they said, so what can I do? And I said, you can do what you can do where you can do it. Goes back to that Teddy Roosevelt quote. Do what you can with what you have where you are. And if you start and you do what you can do with what you have the influence over, and that might just be yourself now. It might be your family. It might be the neighborhood. It might be the community. But start there and start making little differences, because not all of us are going to get a world stage to talk on. Sometimes it's just going to be those small things, but the amount of difference that it will make for you and for the people around you could be huge.
Yes.
So start. Decide that you're going to make a difference in yourself, if nothing else, and start down that road. And I think the other piece of it is don't give up hope that things can get better, because they can. We've seen it. And there are plenty of people out there who have made their life better, and who were dealt a pretty ugly hand growing up. So it can be done. But again, a lot of it is right here. It's whether or not you want to do it, and then not only want to do it, but then have to make the commitment to actually make a difference in your life. And I think you'd be surprised. I guess the other part goes back to what we talked about earlier. Don't be afraid to ask for help. It might just be that you need that little bit of a help just to get you started. Just to give you that push. to give you a couple resources to get you back on your feet.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to ask for that help, because we all need help sometimes. I don't care who you are.
Absolutely do.
No, absolutely.
I think it kind of starts off with people need to know their self-worth. And a lot of people just think, "Hey, I'm not worth it. Just me here, that I'm, this loser that can't get a good job or a good relationship or whatever." How do you think people would, if they don't have a good support system, where could they find that fire inside themselves to get that first step to be like, all right, I'm worthy of a life that I want?
Yeah.
It's hard.
Yeah. It is hard. I think there's lots of ways that you can get there. I'm a huge believer in reading. So read some self-help books. Go to watch podcasts on self-help. Go to YouTube and look at things that you want to get better at, how to do that, because there's plenty of people out there who will give you some advice. Some of the advice is horrible. Let's be honest. But some of it is golden nuggets that you can use. So I think that's part of it. The other part of it is, like we discussed earlier, get yourself a community that will help you become a better version of yourself, whether that's church or, the Rotary Club or, whatever it is in your town, where you can get some people that you start to feel comfortable with, close with, that you can ask questions of or get advice from, or might even help you down that road a little bit. So don't isolate yourself. Get out there, try to find people who are good. Somebody told me one time, surround yourself with people who want to make you better.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the keys.
Yeah.
Yeah, you are your company, and I've realized
100%.
more and more as I get older.
Yes. Oh yeah.
I always tell young kids, and I believe this 100%. Tell me who your hero is. Tell me what your habits are. Tell me who you hang around. It will tell you who you're going to become.
Yeah.
I love that. So spot on.
I wanted to ask you earlier. You mentioned West Point. I went there because I was part of a training unit out of Schenectady for a bit. So we went there and we would train cadets on their
in the summertime.
Yeah. And we would go to you're probably familiar with the Camp Natural Bridge.
Yes.
Yeah. So I was so excited to go to West Point, but because of COVID, we get to West Point and I'm hearing about how awesome the barracks are and everything and the food and all these big promises. And we get to West Point, we find out we're going to be staying at Natural Bridge in tents in the middle of the summer with air conditioning units, which again, I'm preaching to the choir with you. And so I'm not complaining. These are memories that wouldn't change, by the way. So I'm not complaining, but we get there and there's these air conditioning units in these tents that it's so damn cold. You are like icicles. You could just about see your breath, or you're absolutely just
sweating,
not working at all. It was
typical Army stuff. Oh, yeah. But it was made by the lowest bidder. So
yeah. Oh man, not many people have ever heard of Natural Bridge. But I'm stealing this from Stephen Bartlett. He's a professional podcaster, and I'm going to give you the opportunity to give me a question for my next guest, which I don't know if he does this in his, but I'm going to tell my next guest. Actually tonight we're going to be recording with Bob Daughtry. He's a 25-year CIA. And you would get along with him very well. Very easy to talk to, like you are. But I'm going to give you, and you don't have to give me something immediately unless you have an idea off the top of your head. But
so I think the question I would ask, I think I would probably ask two questions. Who's the most famous person he's ever worked with?
Oh,
I believe he worked.
I always like to know that. And I guess the other question I would ask, is there anything that he has had to do, and he doesn't have to give examples, that he regrets he had to do?
Well, I love that.
That's a really good question.
And the question about the most famous person, because sometimes people will ask me, they'll say, if you could go have lunch with anybody in the world, who would it be? And I always love that question. I mean,
Yeah.
and for me,
It'd be hard.
like that, it's easy. Elon Musk.
Ah,
I would, I'm
very.
with you there. He'd be
Yeah. I mean, whether you like him or you hate him,
Yeah.
he's interesting,
Yeah.
man.
He is.
he's an amazing man.
Yeah.
And way smarter than me.
Yeah.
So
Learn a lot.
I would love to pick his
Mhm.
brain for an hour over
Yeah.
lunch.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that's always a great
Mhm.
question, because you get to see, kind of get an insight into who they think are special people.
Right. That's a really, really good question. Well,
I'm trying to think of who. I'm just thinking, man, who would I want that to be?
Yeah.
Because
I don't even know.
at this point with this podcast journey, like I don't really see anything as being a completely impossible as far as but I know Keanu Reeves is really up there for me.
Oh, yeah.
Not because of his popularity, but I've heard so many people talk about him being a pretty genuine individual.
I have too.
Right.
Yeah,
Like an actual
I've heard he's an amazing man.
Yep.
He really is.
We had his cousin on. Nanea Reeves was his. She's his cousin, and she's the CEO of Trip VR.
If he's anything like her, I mean, because she's pretty amazing.
She was.
So yeah.
She was incredible. She
Yeah.
was so different to talk to because she's so. Man, I don't know how to explain it in a completely positive way. If you don't know, if you never heard her talk, she does a TED talk, and I remember we listened to that prior to talk to her, and her and I had I say that I'm going to steal this from Rodney Norman, so I'm going to go off on a tangent here and say Rodney Norman said he had the privilege to watch his brother die of cancer, and when he said that, it changed my perspective. And Rodney Norman, you could tell, he appreciates every second of every day. His daughter actually passed away at, I believe, 28 this year from cancer. And I'm just like, man, this guy be the strongest man at your dad's funeral. He's a pinnacle idea for that. But,
yeah, who was that? That was Jordan Peterson who did that, wasn't it?
Yes, it's Jordan Peterson. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I got off my tangent. What was I
talking about Nanea?
Yeah, so Nanea, she lost her sister like I did to a battle with drugs, and so we had that we related to, and listening to her talk about she lost her husband few years ago, and just such a strong person. And I think that's really important, and I think it really is important for people to show how strong you are with that, because
I mean,
everybody's going to go through stuff like
that. But you can go down such a different path and be bitter and hate life and be mad at God, for stuff like that you go through. But people like her, she's out there trying to help people get through stuff like that, just keep going.
And that's important. And that's a conversation that we don't have enough, is how do you deal with grief and bad things that happen to people, because it's going to happen to us. I mean, I don't care who you are, you're going to die.
Yep.
Exactly.
Yep. Exactly.
We all are.
You're
Yep.
going to die.
Yep.
And hopefully you die before your kids die. But, my mother has buried 2 of her children. So, so we got to be willing to have that conversation. How do you get through it? Yep. Because we're all going to go through it. And if we don't have the tools to get through it, we're going to be like you said, Maka, you're going to be bitter. You're going to be sad, so sad you can't do anything. And that's not where we need to be. You're going to be sad. I got that. And you're going to grieve.
Yep.
But there are tools to be used to help get you through those things.
Exactly.
And
so we need to have that conversation more often.
Yep. I agree completely. Yep. Man, I really enjoy talking to you, man.
Me too.
I want to do this in person one day. Maybe, I got 4 mics. Maybe we could sit down with you and your wife and have a...
Would be amazing.
We'd love that.
Yeah.
So fun.
Cool. But she would fill the show.
Yeah. That's okay.
That's fine.
I love it.
And I believe you, and I had that expectation only because of the initial way you started talking to her, which I love, because, not everybody sadly is that enthusiastic about their significant other, and like...
Yeah, it's like they want to get away from them and they want to, time apart from them, but we could hang out 24/7 all the time and we're good.
I want to be able to do this right here, full time with her and travel. I'm like, what better dream? And we actually have our...
I've only done one show in person, face to face. I've done a lot of live shows, but over Zoom. But I actually did one. There's a guy who lives not 50 miles from me, and he was doing a show, and I went to his studio and sat, and that is amazing.
It's so fun.
It's
yeah.
Nothing better than that.
Yeah,
I'd love to do that sometime.
Yep, that'd be awesome.
well,
We'll make it happen one of these
And
days.
if I'm ever up in your area doing a keynote talk or whatever, we'll have to figure out a way to make that happen.
Yeah,
That'd be really cool.
That'd be really cool. We got a Vietnam vet tomorrow. We're gonna be doing live. So he was a pilot. He flew, I guess, just about everything there was to fly in Vietnam. I'm pretty excited about that.
So cool.
Yeah, that'd be a good show.
Yeah.
But man, I appreciate your time and
so much.
Yeah, I appreciate the motivation you've given us. And yeah, I know the last time we talked, it was right before we were about to talk to somebody else as well, and I kind of went into the next conversation already super comfortable.
Oh yeah, you got us like pumped.
Yeah,
like,
so
yeah.
I appreciate that. I appreciate you guys having me on, and I'm happy to come on anytime you want.
Thank you.
Real quick before we let you go, I want to give you an opportunity to self promote where people can find your book or any other things.
Yeah. So my book is available on Amazon, and it's hardcover, paperback, ebook, and Audible. And I did the reading for the Audible.
Oh.
The only other person voice who's on there is my wife. She read the foreword about the author, kind of my bio, and but everything else I read. And you can also find a link on my website to that Amazon site. And then so if we'd love to have you purchase a book if that's what you want. And my description of that book is it's a book about leadership. There is no theory in the book. It's everyday things that every leader can do to help improve their leadership skills and ability. And at the same time, empower the people they have the privilege to lead. And it is a privilege to be the leader. I agree. To make them better people and better workers for the organization. And that's what that book is about. And I use a lot of my own personal stories and some other people's stories as well to kind of hone those ideas that I talk about. And then if you need a keynote speaker to talk about leadership or success, I do that. In fact, at the end of the month here, I'll be in San Antonio, Texas, talking at a conference. So just contact me. On my website is my cell phone number and my email address. And just reach out to me, and I'm happy to talk to you.
Awesome.
Amazing.
Awesome.
So cool.
I appreciate it again. Yeah, we'll stay in touch and
we'll definitely talk to you soon.
See
Absolutely.
where
Sounds
we all
good.
go on this awesome adventure.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.